Hello and welcome to Inside Edition to discuss national, regional and international issues in depth. Throughout its history, the Kingdom of Bahrain has been constantly moving forward with utmost determination and strong will on the path of developing all sectors and fields of work so as to meet the aspirations of its citizens. Due to this fact, such tremendous efforts and remarkable achievements must be documented and represented in order to build on those gains and proceed towards maintaining their progress. The development of electricity, water and sustainable energy sector in the Kingdom of Bahrain is a recently published book that documents modern history of this field and provides ample details about the stages of development. To know more about it, we are pleased to be joined through Skype by the author of the book, President of the Sustainable Energy Authority, the SEA, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Hussein bin Ali Mirza. Welcome back. Joining me in the studio via Skype call is Dr. Abdul Hussein Mirza. Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Abdul Hussein.
Thank you for hosting me.
Doctor, after this brief introduction, I really have to focus on the name of your book. So the development of electricity, water and sustainable energy sector in the Kingdom of Bahrain. It doesn't come any clearer than that. So what are the main factors that really encourage you to write this book and document these essential phases of national history?
Well, the main factor I can say is about a year ago when His Highness the Prime Minister, Prince Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa, in one of the cabinet meetings, asked the ministers who are in charge of ministries who provide services to the public to write about the history of the service and the achievements of the government since the beginning of these services. So I did some research and I wrote a detailed report to the cabinet, which I presented in one of the meetings. And it was well received by His Highness the Prime Minister and the other ministers who were in the meeting. And I remember, or I recall, that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Mubarak Al Khalifa, the Deputy Prime Minister, was impressed with what I spoke, and he suggested that I should document this in a book for the history purposes. So that gave me encouragement to think about writing the book. The other factor, I have a personal passion to document whatever I'm associated with in my career. For example, I wrote a book in 2015 on the history of oil and gas in Bahrain, and that is becoming a reference now to many people. Another factor I should say is that by documenting what is happening now, we are recording history for the future generation. And if we don't record what's happening now, people in 10 years, 15 years time have to guess what happened. And there will be many guesses which are wrong and maybe misinterpretation of what actually happened during that period. So this is a factual presentation of how things have developed in the last number of years.
And what really interests me when you come and think about the issues that you mentioned in the book, you talked about the attempts, how they were fixed, how they were developed in order to have the successful era that we have right now. So when you went through writing the plot of the book and organizing the segments, what were you thinking of? How did you want to actually express yourself in it?
I said I'll start with the story about the history, because always history is the foundation. And when I researched the history of electricity and water in Bahrain, I found it very interesting and fascinating. And there are many stories of how electricity started in Bahrain. One of these says in 1919, after the First World War, His Highness, the late Sheikh Isa bin Ali, the grandfather of His Majesty the King,
Yeah.
sent his son, Sheikh Abdullah bin Isa, to England, to London, to congratulate the King of Britain, King George V, on the victory of the Allies. Bahrain didn't have electricity at that time, so when he went there and they were celebrating, all the streets were shining with the lights. He went to the hotel, everything is, electricity and telephones and everything else. So he was very impressed. So when he came back to Bahrain, he conveyed what he saw to his father. And that, they say, planted the seed of the first idea of building a power station in Bahrain. But Bahrain at that time did not have enough revenues or funds to build a power station, and there were no skilled people to do it. They kept this in mind until 1925. In 1925, they allocated a fund in the state budget for building a power station. But that fund was not enough on its own. It needed participation by the merchant community and at that time the Manama municipality. So they offered it in 1928. At that time, Sir Charles Belgrave was in Bahrain. He offered it to the people, but nobody wanted to participate or invest in it because they thought this is not a profitable venture. So that also delayed things. So eventually, the Manama municipality put 20% and the government the 80%. And they went, there was an engineer who was sent by Britain from India to look at the situation. So he wrote to various companies internationally to come and build the station in Bahrain. Not many companies offered to come. One of the British companies who had a branch in Bombay, it was called Bombay Company for Calendars and Construction. They made an offer of around 20,000 pounds that they will build the station for the government of Bahrain. 20,000 pounds was about 267,000 rupees at that time. That means 26,000 dinars.
Yes.
Imagine that the cost compared with the cost of Adur 2, which His Majesty opened in 2012, $2.2 billion. So you can see the size.
Massive.
Okay, so this company came and they built the power station, and they chose initially a location for it in one of the municipality's parks, but later the choice was Ras Rumman. Ras Rumman is in the place of what is called Ibn Sina Medical Center now in Ras Rumman. So that they built it there. And Sir Charles Belgrave writes in his memoirs, actually this is a quote from him I'm saying, he said, on 11th of May 1930, we were waiting in my house with the royal family and the Manama municipality and the merchants awaiting the arrival of His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Isa to open the station. So he says, when he arrived, we walked from my house, this is Charles Belgrave, his house was next to the British embassy. So it was not very far from the station in Ras Rumman. So he says, we walked to the station and His Highness Sheikh Hamad bin Isa, at that time he was not officially the ruler. The ruler was still Sheikh Isa bin Ali, but he was, going to be soon the ruler. He opened the station with a key, a special made purpose key in India. It's a silver key. And that was the first power station in Bahrain and in the GCC. So Bahrain had a first. And if I can show the book, the cover of the book, I don't know whether people can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Can they? Okay. Now you see here,
yeah,
because I did sketch Sheikh Hamad, that's Sheikh Hamad bin Isa, and you can see the silver key in his hand. He is opening the station, 11th May 1930.
Wow.
The last one, which His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa, so Sheikh Hamad bin Isa, King, he opened at Dur 30th April 2012. So the idea is Hamad, this is the extension from Hamad to Hamad.
Continuity.
And I sketched this and gave it to an artist, so he did it a painting, and I gifted it to His Majesty, and he really liked it. So that's why I'm using it as a cover of the book.
Marvelous.
What is interesting is that Bahrain was the first country to sort of open a power station, but there was no fuel because Bahrain had not discovered oil yet.
Yeah.
Bahrain discovered oil in June 1932. This was in 1930.
Yeah.
So they used two diesel turbines, and they imported diesel from Iran, from Abadan, which had the British Anglo-Persian company. And because now this station the capacity was about two turbines, each turbine 100 kilowatt. Each 1,000 kilowatt is 1 megawatt. So it was very, very minute. Yeah. And it could power 2,000 lamps, bulbs, and 200 fans. Why fans? Because in those days, people did not have the luxury of air conditioning, or washing machines, or ovens, or dishwashers. So the Yatim then took this opportunity to build an ice factory.
Yes.
And that ice factory is also the first ice factory in the Gulf.
Okay.
Okay. The ice was used because there was no fridge. So they used to have it in big blocks and they cut it to put it in water or in various things. And then in November 1939, Yatim went to New York to visit a fair there, one of the exhibitions, and he met their carrier who invented the air conditioning carrier. So the first air conditioning arrived in Bahrain in 1939, and that was also the first in the Gulf.
Yes.
Then in 1932, the first oil discovery in the Gulf was done. Then in 1936, the first refinery in the Gulf was built in Bahrain. And according to the history books, the first district cooling was built in Awali at that time, which was the first in the world, not only in the Gulf. So Bahrain had many firsts. So that's why the story is fascinating. After 1930, the next power station was built in 1958 in Jubair because the population increased and the demand increased. And then in 1973, when the oil embargo happened, when Israel had war with the Arab states, the price of crude went up from $5 to $35, and that made lots of investment in the country. Yeah. So it needed more electricity. So the government then built the Sitra power station, which was opened in 1976. Then again, with the increase in population and development and so on, in 1981, the first phase of the Rafah power station was opened. Second phase was in 1984. So that was the Rafah power station. In 1997, the government built the Head power station, which is a big one, and then they sold it to the private sector. And that was the start of the privatization of electricity and water in Bahrain. And in 2007, His Highness, the Crown Prince, opened Al Azal power station, which is a private consortium. And in April 2012, His Majesty, in the presence of His Highness, the Prime Minister, at that time I was Minister of Electricity and Water,
yes,
and also Minister of Oil, he opened the Adur Phase 1 power plant, which had 1,234 megawatt capacity of electricity, huge, and 48 gallons of water.
yes.
And now we are building Adur 2, which is even bigger, 1,500 megawatt of electricity and 50 gallons of water. So as you can see, things have developed quite a bit during this period.
Yes, yes, that's amazing. I mean, all of this history and the story of electricity in Bahrain, it took a big part of your book, as you've just mentioned. How important is it of spreading this knowledge about the fundamental phases of the national history among the society, especially with the young generation coming up, and even like with the new career paths when it comes to sustainable development, when it comes to green energy, all of these new career paths that are coming up? How important is sharing this knowledge?
I think it is very important for them to know what the old generation went through to achieve what has been achieved, for example, in the sectors of electricity and water and sustainable energy. The young generation take electricity for granted these days. So they say, for example, that they need electricity 24 hours and they don't want to have any technical cuts and everything else. And because it is so much available, even if it is cut for 5 minutes, they complain.
Right.
While some countries don't have electricity for 17, 18 hours a day.
Right.
So Bahrain, through the leadership and through the people who worked hard, have managed to do such progress, and it didn't come easy. There was lots of resistance to change at the time. The merchants didn't want to invest. The people didn't think this is worthwhile. Some of them were skeptical. But with persistence and with determination and without giving up, things got moving. And that's need to be recorded so that people can learn from this and take it as a role model of how people have to innovate as time goes on. Okay. See, for example, in the last few years, we have now new technology using the renewable energy and sustainable energy. And this, we have to make use of it because the cost of it has come down. There have been tremendous innovation in it. And initially, when we wanted to start this, I started it in Awali by 5 megawatt in 2000. This was a pilot project.
Yeah.
There was lots of resistance from various sectors that they said, we have lots of oil and gas, so why do we need renewable? But that is, of course, something which we proved is wrong, because that pilot project is working fine and it is doing great job. And the cost of renewable has come down in the last few years by 80%. And even in cases it's cheaper than the conventional electricity. plus it is clean energy, it provides employment, it helps bring new technology to Bahrain and new trade. It saves the gas because we were using gas to generate electricity. Now we will be using part of it solar and wind.
Yeah.
So it has many, many advantages that we should put. But like I say, any improvement requires change, and people don't want to change initially. But with persistence and with the support of the leadership here in Bahrain, His Majesty the King, His Highness the Prime Minister, and His Highness the Crown Prince, we have managed to achieve these things. And I'm sure what we are doing today in sustainable energy, somebody in 15, 20 years from now will read the history and see what we have been through to achieve, because at that time they will take it for granted. They said, why they didn't use solar energy before?
Right.
This type of question arises.
Yes.
So it's very important to document all this and make it part of the rich history of Bahrain.
Yes, yes. Doctor, I had the honor to see a lot of the things during your career as Minister of Electricity and Water, and within the last 10 years, there were actually a lot of achievements that were witnessed in the Kingdom of Bahrain in the area of electricity and water. You mentioned some of them, but can you tell us about the most prominent ones in your view that you mentioned in the book?
Well, I think what I did in the book, I actually use statistics, that it is not I am saying it or somebody who works in electricity is saying it. I actually took facts. I have statistics from 2011, year by year, until 2019, which shows that the number of power stations increased, the number of mobile generators increased. They were less than 100. Now we have 304 and more. We have reduced the electricity cuts. I mean, when I went to the electricity in 2011 as Minister of Energy, I had oil and gas and electricity and water. One of my first priorities was to reduce the cuts during the summer, the interruptions, because people were complaining that in the heat and humidity like July, August, there is a cut for maybe 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
So we managed to reduce this, and really in certain parts of the country, there are no cuts at all during the summer. Yeah. And if there is a cut, we provide generators, mobile generators, which the customer doesn't feel the heat because it provides the same electricity.
Right.
We have also done lots of moving to automation, like all the invoices now are electronically produced. Yeah. The payments can be done on the mobile and on WhatsApp and so on. So all these improvements, we can see from statistics that the number of complaints of the people has reduced tremendously from electricity and water. And we get praises instead of complaints. Mm-hmm. Plus, you can see that there is satisfaction with the service. Mm-hmm. Of course, the number of customers has increased tremendously. I mean, we have about 400,000 customers now, and the capacity of currently is 3,992 megawatts. So to have all that running 24 hours without interruption is not an easy job.
Yeah.
But lots of these achievements have been done, and I don't claim credit for them on my own. This is a teamwork with the support of leadership and also support of the media, support of the legislative branch, and support of other people. So if I say we have succeeded in anything, is we have increased communication with people.
Yes.
When I was Minister of Electricity, I used to open my office twice a week for people to come without appointment. And if they have complaint, they sit with me, and I bring one of the sort of executives from electricity. We sort out his problem.
Yeah.
So this made people feel that we as a service organization are providing service. We are not doing them a favor. We are providing a genuine service. And we improve the quality of the service. Today, if you call the call center of electricity and water, they answer your call in less than 20 seconds,
Yes.
which was not, 10 years, 15 years ago, it used to ring, 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 and nobody answers you, and you get frustrated. So there have been lots of improvement.
Yeah.
And one thing which I personally have a passion for, of course, is clean energy and protection of the environment. And this we have made now from nothing, started from zero, it has built up. We trained 310 people free of charge on using renewable energy and solar energy. So all these things have happened during the last 10 years in the tenure of His Majesty the King, who has always supported me and supported the ministers in every aspect.
Absolutely. You actually hit on the next question that I wanted to say, that in line with the constant royal support and directives, the legislative branch of the government also played a pivotal role and gave full priority to ensure the development of electricity and water sector throughout the previous years. What can you tell us about this support, and how did it contribute effectively to achieve the aspired goals you had set?
Okay, in addition to the support from His Majesty, just to give you quickly support of His Majesty, let's take the Sustainable Energy Unit. It was called Sustainable Energy Unit in 2014.
Yeah.
And then His Majesty upgraded it to Sustainable Energy Center. And on 23rd October 2019, he upgraded it to an authority. So we are called Sustainable Energy Authority. And this was his own directive and his own wishes to make all these things. So it is important, and if we have the commitment of the person at the top, and His Highness the Prime Minister and His Highness the Crown Prince, you can be sure that it will be implemented. Now, the legislative branch, both Shura and Council and elected House, we managed to have a very good relationship with them. In other words, if they ask for an appointment, we don't tell them wait for 3 months. Within a few days, they can come and see the minister or the responsible person. Because of this good relations, we managed to show them that electricity and water is an essential thing. For example, you can build many schools, but if you don't have electricity and water in them, nobody can live in them. If you build houses, the same thing. So many services, but without electricity and water, nobody can these days survive. Imagine in this July, in the heat and humidity, if you have shortage of electricity and shortage of water, you will not be able to survive. In actual fact, you will hate yourself.
Yes.
So therefore, the legislative branch were very supportive to us. And I remember we had envy of some other ministers because they used to raise so many questions, but not many questions for the Minister of Electricity at that time.
Yes.
So that is a blessing itself.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful to them, to all the members of the legislative branch, and also to the media and all the people who supported and the executives who made these things possible.
Yes. Well, Doctor, my next question to you is regarding sustainable development. Now, we are passing through a difficult time, as the whole world is, of COVID-19. and the government has put so many things into motion in order to fight the pandemic. But there was a kind of brighter side when it came to COVID-19 hitting the world and the economies being a halt. There's a very huge recognition that the weather in some kind of way has changed. Some even say it might have improved. Do you see that as the same way, having your passion in sustainable development?
Definitely. I mean, it is proven that because of COVID-19 during the last 6 months, say, the pollution in the world has reduced. I mean, in many areas of the world, they are showing videos where things used to be very foggy and cloudy and everything else, but now it is clear. Here in Bahrain, it is the same. Yeah. And now, because of this COVID-19 and the effect on the sort of breathing of the people, and they need respirators and so on, they realize that if we don't use clean energy, in a few years' time, without COVID, we have to wear masks, like part of China.
Yes.
So therefore, it is essential, and some of the countries have said that if they are injecting money to fight COVID, one part they want to invest in clean energy. Yeah. So that shows that it is gaining momentum. Plus the fact, of course, that all the statistics now are showing that the cost of sort of solar PV has come down. The last power station, which was in Abu Dhabi, at Dhafra power station, it is 1,500 megawatt solar energy, and the cost is 5 fils per kilowatt hour, which compared with our cost here, it is quite high. Yeah. But that's on a large scale. Yeah. So that means now this is affordable, it is clean, and it protects the environment. So it lends to that.
Yes. Well, this brings me to my next question, Doctor. After years of dedicating efforts and remarkable achievements in the field of oil, gas, electricity, and water, we know for a fact the way you have always fought for clean energy and for sustainable ways of producing energy. So what does the book say about how you would, or Your Excellency's ambitions, vision to be implemented in this regard?
Well, the vision of, if I say myself, is really from the vision of Bahrain 2030, which is the vision of the leadership and Bahrain. That vision, I feel, for example, no leader or no minister can succeed in any assignment he's given, except if he has a clear vision. And then he has to have plans, strategic plans, because as they say, 80% of success is planning. 80%, that means you have to spend lots of time. For example, they say you spend more time in sharpening the axe than actually cutting the log.
Right.
So planning is very important. And then you have to have key performance indicators. You have to make sure that the team work with you, they respect your decisions. They are not afraid of you, but they want to succeed as a team. So all these things are there. And we have now lots of plans. Some of them have been already implemented. Some of them will be implemented in the future. What comforts me that these plans have achieved the highest support from the cabinet, from His Majesty, from His Highness the Crown Prince. So once you have that, whoever is in the chair, these will be implemented because the plans have been approved and they are being followed up. So that is, to me, the story of success. If you have a plan and you have commitment of the top leadership, and you have targets, and you follow up.
Yeah, yes, yes. I mean, setting the path for the future generation, even when it comes to the execution of these plans that keep changing, and there are always new ways and new technologies that come up that improve the quality of the electricity and the water, as well as the quality of life when it comes to a humane point of view. So, Doctor, here at the end, I really want to know, what can you tell us about the present projects and future plans to secure Bahrain's energy?
Well, we have many major projects going in Bahrain today in the field of energy.
Yeah.
Let's talk first about electricity and water. Currently, they are working on Adur 2, and the first phase of it will be finished before end of this year. It is 1,500 megawatt of electricity additional capacity, in addition to the 3,920 which we already have. So that means it will push it up to 5,400 megawatts.
Massive.
Plus 50 million gallons of water per day. So it will also increase the water supply and the reserve of water in case there is emergency. And this will cost over $1 billion, and it's being done by the private sector. Then there is the 100 megawatt solar farm. This is also going to be done by the private sector, and it will be the biggest for Bahrain, at least 100 megawatt, and it costs more than $100 million. Yeah. And then we have upgraded the transmission network by introducing 400 kV. Our transmission was before 66 and 220 kV. Now we are going to 400. And this will cost $740 million. Plus all the new substations, all the new pipes, and all the new extensions. All these things, of course, are in the pipeline now and in the plan. We have a master plan for 15 years. It's done by a consultant which goes and visits all the consumers, current and future, to see what is their demand for the next 15 years. And basis that, we prepare plans to build stations and substations and pipelines and water distribution systems. So all this is in place. Plus, of course, if you look at the other private sector now are investing heavily in solar and renewable. Recently, for example, we launched 8 schools. The rooftop of them we offer to the private sector that they will use the rooftop to finance, build, operate, and maintain a solar system for 20 years. The Ministry of Education doesn't cost them 1/5, and they don't have to do anything because all the tendering is done by Sustainable Energy Authority. Yeah. And they have achieved, for example, one of the bids was 19.8 fils per kilowatt hour, compared with what they are being charged 29. So it means they are reducing their cost. So what we are hoping will happen in future, the cost of electricity to the business and to the individuals will come down. And these projects, all of them are happening at the same time. And we have many projects in the line of energy conservation and improving efficiency, like district cooling, like smart meters, like changing the air conditioning specification, changing the lighting, changing the insulation specifications. Cars, we want to introduce electric cars in the future. So there are so many things happening at the same time. Of course, these are all in the plans, and somebody, either we will do part of it and the next people who come after us will continue with it.
Yes. Well, Doctor, before we end, you actually mentioned a couple of very promising projects. How does the private sector fit in collaborating for this future?
Well, if we look at the sort of power generation in Bahrain, the power operation is made up of three parts. Power production, that's the main part. Then there is transmission,
Yeah.
bringing that power. You build a power station, say, far away in Adur. So you need transmission lines, cables to bring it closer to the community.
Yeah.
So that's called transmission. Then when you bring it down to the communities, you have substations to distribute it to the customers.
Yeah.
So that's called distribution. So in all these areas, there is progress at the same time.
Yeah.
And if we look at the production today, 80% of electricity produced in Bahrain is by the private sector.
Yes.
Because we have 5 power stations. We have Sitra, we have Rafah. These are the 2 remaining with the government.
Yeah.
Al-Hid, Al-Azl, and Adur are private sector.
Yeah.
So 80% of the production is from the private sector. The same thing with water, by the way, about the same percentage. And all the solar projects most of it are private sector. So it's important because this falls in line with the Vision 2030, which hopes one day government will be only regulator while the private sector are the doers.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdelhassan Mirza, for being with us today. Congratulations again on issuing your book. And I'm sure it is one of the best references to go to when people really want to know the history of how things started off in Bahrain in electricity and water. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting.
And thank you, dear viewers, for being with us. And we will see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.